Stalking isn't simply a crime. It's a sustained pattern of assault on the physical, the mental, and the emotional state. It destroys lives. It's only recently received proper recognition as a crime, and the media have seized upon the horrible stories it generates. While this has helped keep the crime in the public consciousness, underreporting remains a serious issue. Many feel unable to reach out, or worse, ignored when they do. There is more being done than ever before to protect those that are stalked, and to ensure that steps are taken to stop their stalkers before the situation escalates. Scottish Government figures suggest 1 in 10 of us across Scotland will experience at least one form of stalking or harassment. Almost half of those stalked were targeted by someone they do not know. Most of those stalked will have had unwanted contact through e-communication, texts, emails, or messages on social media. Young adults in particular are at risk. 1 in 5 say they have experienced at least one form of stalking. For girls aged between 16 and 24, the rate rises to 1 in just 4. So what is stalking? Police Scotland describe it as 2 or more behaviours directed towards a victim which cause, are intended to cause, or where the perpetrator's behaviour is reckless as to whether it causes the victim to suffer fear and alarm. Anne Mould, the founder and CEO of Action Against Stalking, survived the ordeal her stalker put her through, and talked to us about it and what happened when she sought help.
When I found out that I was being stalked, and this stalking was not going to stop, in fact it was escalating, because this stalker had a fantasy that was going to be his reality, so it was about bondage, rape and torture, and he'd even chosen his location, and I had no means of stopping it, I had no control, and I needed help. At that point I really needed help, so when I reported to the police, I was hoping that they would help me in some way, but to be told that he would have to attack me first is absolutely devastating, because at that point I became helpless. Every time I went out, where was this stalker? How did I know this person wasn't following me home? I felt very, very vulnerable. And through time, mental health and physical health are inextricably interlinked. And living with that long-term period of anxiety, fear, terror, in fact, soon impacted on my physical health. I lost my hair started to fall out, I lost weight, I was having persistent migraines, headaches, nervous anxiety, I wasn't sleeping at night, so I was starting to, my work was suffering, I was struggling to keep going. It impacted, I had gum abscesses, all of a sudden my physical body felt as though it was starting to fail me, and sometimes I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I didn't know whether I would survive this episode of stalking.
Anne led a campaign that put the rights of the survivor at the forefront, demanding recognition not only of the crime, but the suffering that victims go through. Her efforts culminated in Section 39 of the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Act of 2010, where stalking was named and defined as an offence. The law provided greater protection for those who need it most. It's also been the driving force for increased awareness and new training for law enforcement officers. At Action Against Stalking's Cyber Stalking Conference, DSU Debbie Forrester spoke about the work Police Scotland does to help protect those that do come forward and report their stalkers.
We would generally use protection from harassment to get non-harassment orders for victims and those affected by stalking. So the proof under civil law is actually a balance of probabilities. So in some ways, if you can prove that it's more likely to have happened than not, then that would suffice. But if it's under the criminal law, then we have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. So the evidence gathering is much more complicated. So actually, again, protection from harassment being a civil process still sometimes makes it easier for victims and those affected because they're working on a balance of probabilities in terms of evidence gathering.
Non-harassment orders are currently the main way a survivor can forcibly separate themselves from their stalker. It forces the survivor to go through the civil courts, and while the burden of proof is lower, it puts them through an unnecessarily stressful and costly ordeal, just to try to keep themselves safe. Until the order is granted, there is no restrictions on the stalker, and many fear applying for an NHO could provoke their stalker into an escalation of their behaviour. MSP Rona Mackay has been working hard to expand the legislation that would help protect those that would come forward and accuse their stalkers.
You know, there's so it can be a number of things that you would not think of as threatening behaviour can be if you're psychologically being abused, and that's what it is really, psychological abuse. So it's difficult. Yes, it's difficult to legislate for and it's difficult to prosecute, but what we have to do is bring in as much straightforward legislation as we can, so that these things are captured. And again, I go back to why we've paused this, because there are areas where we just weren't sure, whether or not it would be clear to the police and to legislators what route to go down if these were introduced right now. Now, that's why we need to evaluate the act that is there, the new act that came in, and see. And it may well be that nothing's changed, and that there's still a huge need for this. And if that's the case, then we just press the button and go through the process. But as I say, at this stage, obviously we've got a Scottish Parliament election next year, so that we won't be going through this term. But then we would have another 5 years after that, and if it's not me that brings it forward, someone else could.